got this figured out. Got this.
Cool. Well, we're successfully live, so that's good.
Yeah, whenever you're ready, Mattias.
Yeah.
You know, you can kind of take over. I'm still trying to fix this meetup thing because I always do it on my phone and it's like kicks me out. So it is going to be a little bit of a process, but we might have some people trickling in as we go.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for coming. The hot topic today is Airbnbs, and they're obviously kind of a trending thing right now for good reason. I think a lot of people enjoy using the service. I know I typically check there first when I'm going to travel somewhere, and almost prefer to find something unique and cool through Airbnb than going through, a normal hotel. So it's interesting to see how things trickled or how things went. When the pandemic started, it seemed like Airbnb was a terrible idea. I know people who were getting ready to do Airbnb switched over to long-term rentals because they're thinking that they're not going to get anything. However, now I think it's booming because people are wanting to have less contact when they do actually still want to get out a little bit from their Zoomed offices in their house, zoomed out offices. So it's an interesting one. And I presented on this a few years ago. And so we're going to kind of take another look at what it looks like specifically in Rockingham and Harrisonburg. So I can get that started. Just a minute. Awesome. Okay. So short-term rentals. What are short-term rentals? This is not rocket science, but basically there are a few different types of short-term rentals. Typically they're furnished and they're intended for shorter periods of time. They can be considered short-term rentals from 1, 3 months, and even 6 months. Although some different people would define that differently. We'll get into how Harrisonburg defines short-term rentals here in a minute. But we're going to focus more on the vacation style short-term rentals, not just like a 30-day lease or whatever. And that's typically what Airbnb is, although you can do longer stays with services like Airbnbs. Some popular websites you all are probably familiar with would be Airbnb, VRBO, Vacation Rentals by Owner, HomeAway, and One Fine Stay. Has anybody ever used HomeAway or One Fine Stay? I haven't actually ever used those.
I actually have.
Do you recommend any of them? Are they?
Yeah, HomeAway is great. Never had any issues with them. I've used them to rent some cabins down in the southwestern VA, and it was great.
Okay. I'll add them to the list of things to shop for. There's going to have to be like a conglomerate service where you can search all the websites. But yeah. I think one of the biggest drawbacks here with Airbnbs is that things can change. The legality of it, if it's going to be, the zoning is going to change, or if something's going to prevent you from operating in this business. I think that's probably the biggest drawback or the biggest risk you're taking when you're doing Airbnbs. There are areas that historically have always allowed them that could change. But I think it's good to think of plan B, and if it could still make sense as a long-term rental, I think it's certainly worth its while. And as we get into the numbers a little bit, you might see that it might even be worth the risk, even if you can only do it for 2 years. We'll get into that a little bit more. Starting off with Harrisonburg. Harrisonburg in 2019 started creating laws about what you could do with short-term rentals. So there wasn't really anything allowing short-term rentals before. It was kind of not governed. I think it was technically not supposed to be done. And then they created a new ordinance where people would have to, I think, pay around $500 to apply and go in front of city council to do a special use permit. That all changed, or it got adjusted a little bit more in September of last year. And one of the big things that I think they got pushback on was a lot of people just wanting to get out of their house for a JMU football weekend, or a JMU parents weekend, or homecoming, that kind of stuff, because a lot of people were using their homes to make a couple $1,000s or whatever on one weekend for those special JMU events. So they've changed it up a little bit, and we'll get into that here in a minute. No matter what you're doing, you're going to have to apply annually, no matter what type of short-term rental you're going to do in Harrisonburg, and it's going to cost $25 a year for that part. There are two different categories that they define, homestays and short-term rentals. So homestays are more in the lines of, you just want to do this a couple of times a year. So like the JMU weekend kind of scenario. You would not need to get city council approval to use this type of feature, which is really nice. The big kicker for all of these is that it has to be your primary residency. You can't buy a house and just use it for an Airbnb in Harrisonburg. So that's going to be a drawback for a lot of people, and they're kind of throttling, I guess, investors using. I don't know if part of that logic has to do with the lack of housing in general in Harrisonburg. I mean, that's a problem across the nation, but certainly a problem in Harrisonburg. And I know that housing affordability has been one of the key things that people have been, that the city has been trying to address since it's a big problem, rent, all that. And so this could be seen as a way to increase rent. So primary residency. If there's some sort of operator doing this, they would have to be present during this lodging period. That's one other little caveat. You can't, in this circumstance, do more than 30 consecutive nights. I think that would, if you want to do a 30-day rental or more, like a month-to-month kind of thing, they don't need any kind of restrictions on that. So you can just do a standard month-to-month contract, and that's just a standard rental. You don't need to go to the city and apply or anything. You can only do this for 90 days or 90 nights per calendar year, and you can only have a maximum of 4 guests at one time. They will allow this in any residential zoning. You can do this in a single family house, detached, duplex, a townhouse, but it's not allowed in any kind of apartments or multifamily kind of units in this style, the homestay. You don't have to have any off-street, no off-street parking is required. You can have off-street parking. The other type, there's restrictions for that. So if we keep going, the short-term rental style, the bolded items here are what's different than the other style, homestays. So if you want to do a short-term rental, you will have to go to city council and get a special use permit. That's one of the things that's different. And they told me that since they've changed this ordinance, that one person has tried to apply and was denied. However, I think it's not sure why, but they're going to allow people to do this. I think it was kind of a circumstantial thing that they denied this person. So it's still certainly something. I heard a rumor that they weren't allowing anybody to do it anymore, but I think it's still something that they will allow as long as you follow these guidelines. It still needs to be your primary residence. Still, if you have another operator operating it, then you need to have them present for the stay of when people are renting it out. It also can't be more than 30 consecutive nights. There's no limit on how many nights a year you can do this. So that's one of the big differences. It still has to be your primary residency, though. So keep that in mind. And then there's also no maximum number of guests. So you could have, large groups in your house if you wanted to for this. This is, again, allowed in residential areas. The only difference with what type of property you can do is that they would allow for multifamily and apartment type buildings. And in that same regard, they do have to have one off-street parking space for each accommodation space. So the idea is that one of the places downtown couldn't become a big Airbnb facility, and then there would be no parking, and they would be crowding all the public areas in downtown. So moving on to Rockingham County, what regulations are there? There are none. And thanks for coming out, guys. I will see you next month. But seriously, there are none. In Rockingham County, they don't regulate anything, but then they regulate it by the town. So you have to look at each town. If you're looking to, like Adam, you said you're from Bridgewater. Bridgewater have specific guidelines, and so you have to look at those. I heard back from everybody except Elkton, so I don't know about Elkton. But Bridgewater, you need to have a zoning approval. There would be a $25 annual fee, and then you would need to pay 4.5% on any income you make through this quarterly. Broadway, they would be using you have to get a special use permit. There would be a public hearing for it. And they have been approved. I think so far there's none of them has been denied. So that's well received within the community so far. And there's a 5% tax, and I think that's due per month. Timberville hasn't made any regulations at this point. They've had that they've discussed doing so, but they haven't really formalized anything. I would imagine they might do something similar to Broadway in the near future. Dayton, there's a permit that's required. They have a complicated system for how much you'd have to pay for your business license, but it caps at $20. So $20 a year for business license, and then 4.5% of the gross receipts due monthly.
So those are all just taxes of the gross income. It'd be 5% of whatever you make that the town just takes, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
And then just out of curiosity, so you were talking about the short-term rentals. Was that a difference? Like those were all for if you just did vacation and not when you were talking about before, like you didn't have to live in those like the other ones when you're doing kind of the weekend thing. Right.
So Rockingham County doesn't seem to have any regulations about making it a primary residency or not. That seemed to be just Harrisonburg. And actually, I feel like there's probably a tax there as well, but I don't have that information. I could link the resource for that in the chat, but I would imagine you'd be taxed as well in the county, in the city for Airbnb. Yeah, any other questions about that?
Do you foresee any issues on the Broadway Timberville side going into this, or you think that's more safer in that side of Rockingham?
No, I don't know why there would be issues. I guess maybe if neighbors started complaining. The person I spoke to at Broadway said that there hasn't really been any complaints yet, so it wasn't really an issue that they were worried about. But I mean, that stuff can always change. That is, again, the kind of the risk of Airbnb. I know you said you're closing on a property soon. In my mind, if you can get a property that would cash flow as a long-term rental and you did a short-term, like why not do it for a while? I mean, it's definitely, it can be very lucrative. It can be more lucrative. I think what you'd have to question would be what kind of, who would be the person renting from wanting to stay in Broadway, what would that demographic look like? Does your house fit that kind of bill? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, it does. It does.
And we'll get into that a little bit more because I think different areas are a little bit different as far as what people want. So yeah, analyzing the market, speaking of which. Like, yeah, so exactly what we were just talking about. What need are you fulfilling? I was thinking about the 30-day time frame. So there's the Reserve at Stoneport and right outside of Harrisonburg. They have a bunch of options for short-term rentals, and a lot of people, that's one of their few options when they want to go ahead and make a transition. So they're selling their house and they haven't found one yet. So they're like, well, we need to find some kind of short-term rental. They charge more the shorter the time. So if you can sign a year lease, it'd be cheaper versus 6 months versus 3 months versus 1 month. And I like that idea. Now I know that you could run into vacancy issues and it might not really pan out, but I feel like there's traveling nurses, there's people that it could, I'm curious about that need, how much somebody just with a residential house, even in Harrisonburg where, if you're renting it at least by 30 days, you're following the guidelines. That could be a niche that nobody's really thinking to fill. And it's certainly always a need often when I am selling houses. So anyway, what need will you be fulfilling in Massanutten? That's for vacationers wanting a cool place to stay while they vacation. How many people do you think will be using the property when they rent? So I think that if you're looking at Harrisonburg, the likely people on a JMU weekend may not be as many as somebody wanting to vacation for a week in Massanutten. So that could be, parents coming down to JMU, or it could be, 3 or 4 people. So, having a smaller option could be more desirable, a little bit cheaper. Whereas Massanutten, kind of the more you can sleep, the better. So you can get a 5-bedroom house, for example, if you can deck those out with a bunch of bunk beds and that kind of stuff, it can always help maximize, the interest, because bigger groups will come to vacation in the summers mostly. And then also, when are they likely to book? So like Massanutten, you would think, or I often thought that the winter would be the busiest time for them, but it's actually the summer. And that's because people are vacationing with their kids getting, out of school. And there's hands down, it's the busiest in the summer there in Massanutten. They have the water park, they have obstacle courses, they have mountain biking, they have a few things that you can do there. So then once you kind of establish who the demographic is going to be that's going to be using your property, you want to think about what's the best type of property to suit them, like what's going to get them to actually book with you. So in Massanutten, the log cabin is kind of like the gold standard. If you think about people looking through a bunch of different houses, they're coming from Northern Virginia, likely, and they're going to be, wanting to have that cabin experience. So if you can get a log cabin kind of feel, that's great. You can do that with the actual house. I know I've heard of people re-siding, putting like actual logs on the side of the house. That's pretty expensive, but I mean, that kind of thing can really make a difference. And then also just decor inside. So if you can get a stuffed bear, that's gold. If a moose head might even be more. But just kind of going through that feel. The ones I've walked through often have like, old skis on the walls, those kind of things, and just getting that cabiny feel in Massanutten is, I think, pretty key. But if you're going to go in Harrisonburg and you're targeting, JMU people, JMU parents, that's probably not going to be a log cabiny feel. There you could just kind of go get stylish. I could see the country, the modern country house kind of feel being popular, or a contemporary style. And I think just having nice decor, I would consider hiring a interior designer or a stager to help pick out items to put in, because I think that kind of stuff makes a huge difference when people are clicking through multiple properties. I think that you also want to have good photography. I think that's another thing that's really key. So definitely consider paying for that. Most people probably could do decent with their phones, but the difference that you can get with the professional photographer is pretty drastic. Any questions about that? Like what style houses kind of stuff in this area? Cool. So moving on. I think the best thing to do is look at the competition. What are they doing? I tried to find a good quote about copying the competition, and then I found this one by George Carlin that was even funnier. So if you can't beat them, arrange to have them beaten. Don't actually do that, but seriously, like look at what else is on Airbnb. You can do this a couple of different ways. You can try to pretend you're booking a place on their website. You can also use some of the tools that we'll talk about here, like AirDNA. So AirDNA, go ahead.
If you don't mind. One thing too to think about, because we were talking about markets, just a thought that could help is, like you were saying, look at what the competition's doing. And then like here, for example, there are a lot of cabins. So if you're looking to get into Airbnb, do you want to do a lot of cabins, or what are people that are coming here? What's missing? Like, for example, there weren't any real downtown Airbnbs here in Ray, and some people did like to stay here, and that way they're close to walking distance for certain things. Or that's just an example. Like just think a little bit about what the market might be missing, and then what type of property or what you could do to fulfill that. And then you basically have something where there's not many or no other properties doing that.
That's a really good point. And that's where you can find like properties also like yurts or teepees. I don't know about you guys, but I have like on my bucket list, I want to stay in a yurt at some point, and I want to stay in a teepee at some point. When I might go to some random area just to do that. And I think that's a really good point. Like being different than the rest is also a good thing. I think copying what other people have done is probably safe, but you could have a much bigger business if you're able to provide something that isn't out there and people really like. Has anybody done research through AirDNA or any other websites?
I looked at AirDNA for the first time last week for an out-of-town possibility, and it seemed a little inflated, but I didn't have the data to support that, just kind of gut feeling.
Sure. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. That's the only one I've really used. Beyond pricing came up as another option. I haven't actually played with it, but something to look at. And then Evolve, I put Evolve vacationrentals.com. They're more of a management company, but I think they have people that would kind of walk you through setting it up and help you with some of those things. So another service that you could potentially think about if you're looking at buying a property for a vacation rental. One of the things that I've told people that are thinking about getting into it is if it were me, I think I would prefer buying one that's already established to start. There's a couple benefits to that. Like if you're looking at the Massanutten market, for example, you would get usually a furnished house, which that can be nice. And they would have a lot of that furnishing already. And then you would also be able to see kind of how it's performing. And you could probably find out ways to, or think about ways to improve it, but you would at least have a bit of a baseline to go off of. So I think that can be a nice luxury if you can find one that's already in existence. Right now there's 2 houses for sale in Massanutten. So
Is that the timeshare one?
What's that?
Going foreclosure. There's a foreclosure auction about 2 or 3 Massanutten timeshare, I think, properties. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm referring to 2 that are on the market. I don't know about the timeshare and how that would really work with the foreclosure, because what do you really own?
Right.
Is there a marketplace, like a secondary marketplace for existing Airbnbs? Like how
I'm not
would you
aware of
know-
one.
Yeah, like how would you know looking at Zillow or Realtor.com if it's an Airbnb?
That's a great question. So typically how I do it is I go in the MLS and do a keyword search. So in Massanutten, they typically list on vacation rental by owner. They don't list on Airbnb for whatever reason. I think people are probably doing both more now, but that's kind of been the status quo. So most of the ones that are listed will come up with a VRBO number, and that's often in the internal comments. So with only agents can read. So what I do is I do a search for that, and then I can kind of create a custom search. Otherwise, they will often be described that way as well in the comments. So without like a keyword search tool, you kind of have to dig a little manually. Yeah, it's a good question though. All right, so I did a case study in 2019 about one that was on the market to just kind of put it through the number cruncher. And since there aren't any available right now, I couldn't really do an updated one. And so there's going to be a couple caveats here. Like there's the prices have probably likely gone up. Massanutten is often a slower market, but right now it's pretty busy, which is a really interesting trend. I think there's a lot of people that are coming from Northern Virginia wanting to buy a second home and maybe rent it out a little bit as well. But I think a lot of people are just wanting a second place. They're working remotely. They're able to get it to a secluded retreat, but not be too far from stuff. And Massanutten kind of fits that niche in a lot of ways. So like I said, there's only 2 on the market right now. They're not vacation rentals. So this was the property.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, this is Carlos. I'm based out of Philadelphia.
Oh, hey,
And I
Carlos.
just had a question. So, hey, what's up, guys? So you were saying this is a vacation property on the market. What do you mean by that? You mean, I came a little late, sorry about that, but you mean that this is on the VRBO site? And
Yeah, let me clarify that again. So this was a property that was on the market, like to sell. Somebody could buy this property. But it was back in 2019. I couldn't find any that were for sale right now. So I'm just revisiting this one from the past, just to kind of give you an idea how you can analyze these going forward.
gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. So this was the listing on vacation rentals by owner. They were averaging $333 per night. This is the MLS sheet. A 5-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,404 finished square feet. It checks the boxes of a lot of bedrooms. I don't remember how much it actually could sleep, but I would imagine some of those bedrooms would have those, bunk beds and things that they could have an occupancy of 16, something like that. And so that's ideal for people wanting to vacation with their family. So I plugged this into analysis. This is probably teeny. I don't know. Can anybody actually read this? No.
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay, good. This is the numbers that I ran. I was basing this off of a investment type mortgage where you'd put 25% down. At the time, 5% was a pretty good rate for that. Things have changed. And let's see what else would be different now. The purchase price would probably also be higher now, just given the market. Other than that, this would be some of the similar numbers that you would find now. If you notice, the cap rate is 12%, and the return on initial investment, the cash flow on initial investment, is 30%. So that can be pretty good. Those numbers are pretty nice. What I did to get these numbers was I spoke with a bunch of people up at Massanutten that were familiar with Airbnbs, including kind of the go-to guy. There is a go-to guy in Massanutten. His name is Lee Daring. Lee does pretty much anything you want them to do. So you could be an investor, Carlos, you could be investing out of Philadelphia and not really have to do much on site. because he will check people in, he will check people out. If you want a physical person there, that's like $50 each time. He would have a crew to do a lot of different things. So the cleaning he could take care of. He could do snow removal, cutting grass if there is grass. There's often not very much grass in Massanutten to cut, but any kind of maintenance things that come up, if a plumbing leak happens, he can take care of it for you. So definitely a good person to talk to. I took an occupancy rate of 39%. So in here, I plugged it in as a vacancy rate of 61%. That was from people's experiences in Massanutten, but also verifying it with AirDNA. That was what they projected. And then we did an average of that $333 a night. I took in the actual real estate taxes. I got a property insurance quote from Hammond Insurance for $1,600 a year. I even plugged in some offsite management if you wanted it. I talked to Lee about kind of what a person could expect per month or whatever for any kind of maintenance issues, and it came out to be $900 a year. Utilities, got some average utilities, and also plugged in cable and internet. I budgeted $150 a month for that, which seems probably more. I don't know about you all, but I've noticed that more and more Airbnbs don't actually have cable. They would have internet with like a Roku stick or something, and people are logging into their Netflix. I think you probably don't even need to provide an account for people to use. Like, people will probably log into their own, and you may not even have to pay for cable. I think that's kind of on its way out for these.
I agree with that. In fact, a lot of people, my people that I check with all the time about what do they want in or features in a cabin, as an example, they definitely don't want to have anything to do with technology. They want to be totally disconnected from the world. They just need to have access to probably the internet or a mobile service in case that there's an emergency or they need to do something. But you're right about that. Cable is not essential anymore.
Yeah, that's great. So I had an advertising budget. I believe that was the fee for vacation rental by owner per year. I believe that's what that was. And so that's where everything kind of came down to, a taxable net income of $16,000 a year. That's after depreciation and adding principal paybacks. So obviously those numbers are pretty good. That's why I think that if you have a property that that you can rent on a long-term basis, and you have no reason not to, like, there's no laws preventing you right now from doing Airbnb, like why not? If you buy the furniture and you can only do it for a year, you're probably still going to be okay. You're probably going to still make some money. But hopefully, obviously, it would last a lot longer. I think in Massanutten, there's been a lot of discussion. Like, there's a lot of back and forth all the time about these kind of things. So that's probably an ongoing concern for people that do it there. But it's been a thing for a long time. So I don't think it's necessarily going anywhere. So what AirDNA looks like a little bit. You can see some of the different charts. And Adam, I don't know, is this still what it looks like? This is, again, a couple of years old. They might have refreshed it a little bit.
Yeah, from what I remember, that's exactly what it looks like.
Okay. And what I like about this too is that you can actually look at comps, kind of see how they're performing. And there's properties in Massanutten, for example, that you got to kind of think through this a little bit more. There's properties that will not be listed the whole time, so they might have a lower occupancy rate, right? But they actually maybe live there for 6 months of the year, and so that's not really fair to compare. They might take up some of the most desirable times, and so it's good to do a deep dive and kind of take the whole market into consideration when you're comparing properties. Does anybody have any questions about that? Any comments? Any discussions? Speechless. I know, it's good.
it would seem that if you were going to do this, you know, on an ongoing basis, you'd want to have like that property manager like Lee
Yeah.
at Massanutten running the operation, or especially if you didn't live in the area. Like say you're out of state, or say somebody lived in Richmond but wanted to buy a place at Massanutten and do a you know, rental, short-term rental like that. I wouldn't buy it unless you could make an arrangement like that.
You need somebody. I agree with you. I think even me living here would really like to have somebody like, you know, that would be willing to go out and do these things at last minute or whatever, or have a second option. So I think it's a great service. And I would imagine most vacation areas like this would have people like that. I've heard this guy's name a couple different times from different people. So I think there are probably in larger areas, there might be more, you know, more options there, and they might be more advertised, not just word of mouth.
Now, the ideal way to do this is to have a number of these type of units and places you want to visit, so you can go down and write everything off as you travel everywhere.
You got my game plan. I want a lake one. I want a lake house next.
There you go.
Fun.
On the other side of the mountain in Whittier Cabins, they'll do management for you, take care of everything. They just charge your first night's rent. So that can be pretty expensive. It's just for a weekend, but like if it's a week rental or something, that's not bad. They'll take care of everything.
It's good to know.
That's in Steinersville area.
Another little trick with Airbnbs too that you can do is if let's say you get, especially in the winter. So in the winter in Massanutten, for example, there's a lot more weekend travelers. So let's say your rate is $300 or whatever a night, and you get somebody booking 2 nights, you can just message them when they book and say, hey, would you be willing to stay an extra night? We'll give it to you for $100. And that, you know, has no addition. You're just getting extra money there. It's not like it's costing you more to do. You're still going to have the cleaning fee or the cleaning, you know, it's still, all that stuff is still gonna be the same. So definitely something to keep in mind.
Another thing too that I've seen some people do from around here, if they are like out of state, like you all were talking about earlier, is they just find somebody local that maybe does the grass, and they also maybe oversee the cleaning or whatever. But with that person as like the boots on the ground, it doesn't have to be that expensive. And then they just do everything digitally through Airbnb or VRBO. But if you really want to be hands off and not deal with absolutely anything, then there are companies, at least here, like I'm sure you guys have them over in Rockingham County, but here in Page County, I mean, there's one in particular that they aren't cheap, but they'll do everything for you. They'll take care of all the calls, the bookings, everything. So
yeah, it is definitely more labor intensive if you want to do that kind of stuff. So that's a good point. And I think isn't that what Evolve does too? Don't they do a lot of that, or getting it set up? I believe they do. That's kind of like I think they're based out of Colorado, but they will kind of take on a lot of the management. And then there's local places as well in Massanutten that are specifically for that. But
yeah,
hey, real quick, you had mentioned the lake rental. Personal preference, that's exactly what I want to do, is get a lake rental house. Do you think Lake Anna or Smith Mountain is better?
I haven't actually been to Smith Mountain, surprisingly, so I can't say. I like Deep Creek, even though it's a small lake. It's got the ski resort.
It does for the winter. Yeah, I've been to Deep Creek a few times, and it's a great area, but you know, it's just a little bit farther drive than Lake Anna. It's
smaller.
Yeah. Very true.
But you would have that year-round kind of activity.
Very true.
Some others.
Very true.
So okay. I don't know. That's kind of what I've thought, but it seems like a little bit of a sacrifice in some ways.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any areas that they've thought about? I mean, would you think about a beach rental? I feel like that scares me a little bit.
That's what I've been kicking around is Outer Banks.
Nice.
But, from what I've seen, obviously I've got to have boots on the ground being 5 hours away. And that could cost, 20-25% of my income just to get somebody to manage it.
Is that like Twitty? I know they do a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, those places will do it. Depending on the size of the house and the location, I think maybe for as low as like 12%.
Okay.
But yeah, as much as 20 to 25%.
Yeah, I wonder if there's other people there. I imagine there'd be some people there that would do a similar service without maybe the bookings part of it, but I'm sure there'd be cleaners you could hire and that kind of stuff.
The prices for places in the Outer Banks, if you're on the beach side of the main road, it's about $100,000 more than the same house across the street.
Yeah, but I'm finding that's where people want to be. They don't want to have to cross the highway to get to the beach.
Yeah.
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 Well, the thing is too, is if you get lucky, you can find sometimes Airbnbs might come with a handyman or something, and then you don't have to worry about paying somebody that 20-25, but that assumes you're okay with doing kind of the booking work and taking some of the calls occasionally, that could really help out with your revenue.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like you got to love that customer service stuff if you're going to take that on. Cause I'm sure Ronald
Sleeping over here. Damn, baby.
sorry. Yeah, I think you got to really enjoy that part of it if you're going to take it on. Cause I know that I've asked a bunch of questions to the people I stay with.
Yeah.
How you doing? This is Carlos again.
Hey.
I think it's a really good idea, especially since this whole thing is going on. I know that when everything goes back to normal, I'm not sure about hospitality right now. I'm not sure about the hospitality as far as commercial. I mean, the way they purchased those buildings, I guess they expected everything to be the same, but now with Zoom, the big play would be, I would assume, Airbnb for just vacation travel. That's always going to be there. But then for those big corporate, like I work for UHS and one of those big companies, and they used to send people out all the time. Hey, you just go there, go meet people. And now, they're like, oh, we'll just use Zoom. But I think it was that just a simple thing where people didn't know that they could use Zoom for whatever reason.
Well, today I was putting together fans. I was only here for like 30 minutes.
It's a good point. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things change. I know that a lot of speculation is happening in the commercial sector in general. Office space. Are people going to want larger offices to spread out more, as it used to be kind of closer, hangout areas? Or are office spaces going to go away altogether and people are just going to work from home? I know a lot of people that are very sick of working from home, so I don't know. We'll see. That's a good point. If you can just do a Zoom call instead of traveling somewhere.
I think there was a lot of pushback on it from the C-level people, which are, they like that if something works, they don't like going, they don't like to change it, which makes sense. And but I mean, now that you realize, like, oh, there's no need to spend that kind of money unless you actually need, you can kind of do it ad hoc and send contractors out. There's no need to have people, doing any of that. So now that Airbnb space looks like a good opportunity for strict vacations. You don't have to compete with the commercial spots anymore. The commercial would have to like probably lower their prices so low to the point where it's like, just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks. Has anybody stayed in a really unique place through Airbnb or one of those? I stayed in a weird haunted, almost, I wasn't haunted, but it appeared to be like it could be. And it was like some lady was living there and we were like upstairs. It was very strange. She made us like gluten-free pancakes in the morning. It was
So you're pretty much in her house then?
Yeah, it wasn't like a separate apartment. It was like we went upstairs. She like greeted us and we walked upstairs and it was really weird.
Oh, it is. I don't know, man.
I mean, it was a
Like-
cool house. It would have been awesome if we were there alone. It was just
Yeah, I've just seen so many like Ted Bundy documentaries now, like watching Netflix, and like I can't imagine having somebody be in there or staying in somebody like that situation. It's crazy.
She was a realtor, actually, in that I forget what town it was, but it's like Birmingham or something. Yeah.
But so are you mostly seeing? So you're mostly seeing Massanutten and then downtown Harrisonburg are like the two hot spots for Rockingham County for Airbnbs, or is there any other pockets that are like you see a lot of people going towards one, and then also where do you think the opportunity is?
Okay, so I would say downtown's great for JMU stuff, but I would say that probably they're expanded a lot further than just downtown, probably all of Harrisonburg and trickling into the county as well. And I think that people often raise the prices for Massanutten rentals, even for JMU weekends, because that's they get people that want to stay up there as well. I know that there are some out. I think you can think about it a little bit about the experience. Like if you're looking at coming from Northern Virginia and if you search for, this is how it always works when you're on Airbnb, you look for like kind of the general location you want to go. And then you're like, oh, well, there's a really cool looking one. But then it ends up being like further away than what you actually anticipated. So you might look at Massanutten and then find a really cool one in like Raleigh, Virginia. And I know that there is a yurt, for example, in Raleigh. And I think that could be a really cool area, a really cool feel that's not too far from things that would have a mountainous kind of feel. So I think you could do it really in a lot of different places, but I think it's meeting that niche, like what people are wanting. And I think people from Northern Virginia is probably wanting to escape a little bit. So if it's not a JMU thing, it might be a remote kind of feel right now, especially with the pandemic.
Yeah. What do you think are like would be the most opportunity that you're seeing right now, like with Airbnb?
I don't know if this is the most opportunity, but I've speculated buying some land. Like, do you know how land speculation is kind of risky? Like, okay, the town could grow this way. Well, I thought about what if you figure out a way to throw a bunch of yurts on that land? Because you can't really pay for land, make it worthwhile with like, letting cattle graze on it and renting it to a farmer. It's not really going to cover the expense of acquiring it, especially if you're, financing it. But with something like that could, be interesting. And I think those kind of experiences people would be excited about. And as long as they're not like, in a little circle, like they would be a little bit more remote. You could find yourself in if you got a place close to town, you could find yourself in a really good position later on without too much infrastructure that you have to tear down.
Have you, I don't know if you've heard of this before, but I just realized before COVID, I'd heard a lot about people that were, trying to do like tiny home developments or putting tiny homes on places to do Airbnb. And I just realized that since COVID, nobody has mentioned that pretty much at all. Like,
It's true.
that was one of the big things that it seemed like it would have been a really good opportunity because people want to get out. It's kind of a little adventure, but if you have a tiny home now, nobody wants to be cramped up in something like that with the way COVID's been. So
that's a really good point. Like I think part of the escape thing probably would not feel great. Everybody's feeling confined right now.
You gotta I feel like if you do something like that, the opportunity with that is that you've got to have a really good outdoor setting to where, like, I saw one where the tiny home, you pretty much just slept in it, but it got a hot tub, nice patio. It was a really nice setting. So I can see some opportunity there still, but the people that were talking about doing tiny home developments, I haven't heard from them. It's been quiet.
Yeah. No, I could see that being a trending down. Does anybody else have any ideas? They want to share their $1 million idea on YouTube Live?
Or if you're doing an Airbnb now, like what your experience has been and, what you feel are some opportunities or some things that have really helped you operate better.
Carlos, do you have one?
An Airbnb experience?
Or no, do you own an Airbnb?
Oh no. I know a couple people that do Airbnbs though, and they do have in-house managers. That seems to be the thing. I know one person, they particularly have somebody that they kind of stay at the Airbnb and manage the rest of the Airbnbs.
Okay.
So
that's a good idea. Especially if like you have a multi-family kind of place. Camper is another idea. That one could be a little bit easier with like septic problems, right? If you're just getting a piece of land, camper could be a cool experience for some people, especially if you get like a retro one.
You know what I was thinking might be a good idea? A lot of those mansions that people are they're probably going to get devalued soon. Those would be good places to stay. You know, you get a bunch of people share. You know, nobody needs 16 bedrooms. 7 bedrooms. Nobody needs that many rooms, so it's a perfect, really, vacation spot. Or just say we're going to be in this area. Everybody rent out the former mansion, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We did. I don't know if you remember, Mattias, but we had one guy come on. I think it might have actually been Kyle. The first time he was talking, he said he had a guy that was a friend back when everything went, sideways for the real estate market. The guy was buying those mansions like Carlos is talking about. And he did Airbnb them and did really well with them, just because there's people pulling their money together just to have a new experience. And also the people that were very wealthy didn't want to Airbnb and be in a 1,200 square foot home. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I wonder what you could, rent out a 10,000 square foot house.
If it's in the right area, you probably could get the family reunions and the big events. It's definitely it's a hot commodity if you position it that way.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
It's a great idea.
It'd almost be like being a wedding. It could potentially be also a wedding destination, but it's almost like an event thing then. It's just for an experience too.
Yeah, you could have like family stay. And
does everyone want to pull together $1 million and buy one?
Yep. Bailey's
I have a family friend. They have a big cabin out in Cremora, but they do like events and stuff. It's like on a little man-made lake, but I think it's like $1 million, $1.5 million. But I think they do really well with it, just between weddings and that kind of thing. They stay booked too. Forget the name of it, otherwise I'd tell you guys so you can look at it. But
yeah. Let's pull our money.
Yeah, sounds good. Another thing I was thinking, just for like later on in my investing career, even if you can get like a beach house just for personal use, but it's not a liability, you're making at least a little bit with VRBO, that'd probably be worth it. I mean, you don't have to pay to go stay somewhere, have your own place. You can benefit from the appreciation and tax write-offs and at least not cost you anything, even if it doesn't cash flow like crazy.
Yeah, Adam, are you still around? Did you look into what the flood insurance would be, or what insurance would be in general?
I didn't get into the flood insurance that deep, other than noting I would have to buy some. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a concern. But from what I was able to kind of dig up, is most of those beach rentals are lucky to break even. I mean, Outer Banks alone right now things are hitting the market and they're going under contract within 18 hours. And that's the norm. Like, that's not the exception. And because prices are sky high right now, it's hard to make any money and even break even on them. And, Bailey, you mentioned, well, at least you have a place to go and make memories, which that's almost like you'd have to bank. That'd have to be your why, like your reason for doing it, because it doesn't sound like it's from the numbers I was putting together, there's no cash on cash return, and I could make a lot more money putting it in the stock market, right? Every week you go, you're potentially taking $3,000-$4,000 out of your pocket, right? So then you're pressured internally to not go during prime season and not get that enjoyment you wanted, because you're stealing out of your own pocket, and then you're going for like Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But the idea that he was positioning this not as a cash flow model, it's a personal property that pays off itself if you rent it, if you go a couple of weeks or on a temporary basis throughout the year, and then you rent it out. Yeah, if you break even, I think it will be a great equity buildup. You don't really pay a lot of money out of your pocket to buy something, and it's also a place to park your money if you have a lot of cash and you can't do 1031 exchange. It's a place for you to park your money.
Yeah, absolutely. The one risk, like with oceanfront down there, is a lot of times you can't get insurance coverage on them because the towns won't let you rebuild them if a hurricane were to wipe them out. So if they're, excuse me, if they're like right on the dunes, specifically like Rodanthe and some of those areas where the water washes up under the pilings, like those people they're selling those down there right now for probably 25 cents on the dollar because they're just trying to get what they can, knowing that there's, lifespan short on those. You can't rebuild once something happens to them.
That's interesting. That's a really good point. I would wonder how long it would take for if you're only breaking even now. Like, I'm imagining that will get better. And would it be 5 years? How long would that take till? And of course, that's a little bit speculative, but yeah, I would imagine we'd get there sometime. And if you're wanting to just, park your money somewhere.
I think the big thing too, like Bailey and Adam were saying, is it just depends on your why. Like the other Adam was saying, is that if you buy something and you're getting a lot of income and you're just basically getting the tax benefits and breaking even, then you're still making money in that regard. And then you still got an asset that's going to appreciate, because especially if you're buying those prices where you've got really good location, then that's a reason why. And then, like you also just have it to where it's paying for itself. So it really just depends what your investing goals are. And that's what maybe a lot of people could think about too with regards to any Airbnb is, am I doing it for cash flow? Am I doing it for appreciation? Tax benefits, et cetera. Because there's a lot of different ways that people play it. And just right now with the way the market is, I see a lot of people that just, one, don't want to be in the stock market. Two, they want to lock in this long-term cheap debt. And then three, they're looking for tax write-offs and appreciation, or just basically anything, any yield, because they can't find it anywhere else. So there's, any of those reasons could be a reason why you're going to invest. One might be stronger for someone else than the other. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah, because like to me, just like long term, like for example, like Moab, Utah, that's a really cool spot if you like mountain biking or ATVs or anything like that. But if you were to buy just a standard rental there, it would never pay for itself, like just because of how small it is. But if you could have like, there's a whole world really, and if you could break even with it, even like once you hit retirement, you could own properties in really cool spots just to travel around freely and have your own places. I think that's a really good, I don't know, to me it's a goal to have just for retirement.
Yeah. Take your RV to all your vacation houses. That's your full-time life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, have one on the beach, have one on a lake, one out in Utah.
Best time to buy those beach houses is after a hurricane goes through.
Yep, there you go.
Good idea. Has anybody thought about or looked into international properties, vacation spots that we could Airbnb as well?
Aruba's a good place.
That's near shore, not really international.
What's that?
That's near shore. It's not really international. Takes away the excitement.
Where's that for you?
I mean, I have a friend who has been talking to me about something in the Mediterranean. So the northern Morocco area.
Yeah.
It looks on paper really lucrative. The only thing that's sketchy about it, or the only thing that I, as an investor, an overseas investor, would be worried about the exchange rate and how comfortable I am, or I was at that time, keeping my big chunk of my money abroad. So imagine that you need to liquidate. What would that look like? Is it like a matter of just a 60-day, 90-day on the market, or is it 2-3 year on the market? What kind of taxes? How do you bring the money back? There are a lot of questions that I didn't have good answers for, but it was really lucrative.
It's a really good point. Exchange rates could eat you up. I grew up going to Switzerland. My mom's from Switzerland, and so we would go visit family. And there were times where the franc was, worth half a dollar, and that's, I think, flipped. And that, I had people, we would give gifts in dollars sometimes, and they would hold them and try to find the best time to exchange them. But when you make that a much bigger purchase, it's a big deal.
I've had friends that have gone to Thailand for like months at a time. I know you can rent out places like really cheap there. I haven't heard from an investor's perspective though.
Does anybody have any more questions on Airbnb?
Yeah, so it seems like the regulations for Airbnb are here to stay. My brother does a decent amount here in the city, and back in 2015, it was kind of like the wild, wild west, and they could just rent here and there. But as the regulations came, people kind of play games with their primary residences. I know his wife and him, they kind of each had their own primary residence, and the city kind of wrote him a letter after a couple years, and the tax is about 7% in the city. But
You're talking about Charlottesville?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think there's potential opportunity for, as you get more out into the counties and the rural where there's not as much regulation. I have an associate I met at the meetup group who's got a place called the White Lotus Eco Spa, and it's in Greene County, just north on 29. And so he has some land, and it's rural, but he's got neat places. He's got a hobbit house. He's got a tree house. He's got the teepee. And he says through the Airbnb, it stays booked. So I think it's an opportunity for people who might have either some rural land or something. If they could, it's probably a lifestyle that would take a little bit of investment, but he says that he can create a structure for about $30,000 to $40,000 and can pretty much get his money back in about 2 years. So, and he says he stays booked. People are looking for an experience, but I know for my brother, he still rents his house out, his primary residence, and it's kind of motivation for him and his wife to get out of town for the weekend or for a trip or something. It's a way to justify it. But he did switch the other properties a little bit more just over to longer term rental, just based on some hassle factor. So there's management involved for sure.
When did the regulations start in Charlottesville? Do you remember?
Maybe 2016 or 18. They kind of are bringing them in slowly. But
Sure.
One thing the city's doing, which they might change, is they might allow residential lots to build a second unit because they want to increase density. And there's a lot of decent sized lots. And if they give that a green light, then people will be able to kind of build a separate cottage, and then it'll be kind of wide open again for Airbnb in the cottage, or maybe staying in there yourself and renting out your whole house. So
Harrisonburg is exploring things like that as well. They're looking at new zoning types, or they've already implemented new zoning types, but the secondary dwelling is an interesting one. It's a really good point. If that's if your primary residence has a secondary dwelling. Yeah, it's a great
place for you to stay. I mean, I think it's just could be a good strategy to help you, build equity, pay your bills, things like that in your own house.
Yeah.
But also you have to be comfortable with somebody else sleeping in your bed. So I don't know,
As long as that weird lady is not there. Making me pancakes.
Gluten-free pancakes at that.
Gluten-free. Yeah, I think they were dairy-free too. I don't know what was in them.
Not dairy or gluten.
Yeah, anybody else have any questions or comments? Cool. Well, if anybody is on here that hasn't been here before and wants to go on the mailing list, put your email in the chat. We can add you to that. We just only send updates about the meetings, so not a spam thing. And I guess we can talk about next month. We have Hans Harmon speaking next month. He's going to be talking about commercial development. If you don't know Hans, he owns Momentum Earthworks, but he's also been involved in many other things. He owns rentals. He's done some actually created kind of a auxiliary dwelling kind of situation in Harrisonburg before people were even thinking about it, which is pretty cool. He's an all-around awesome guy who's got a lot of experience. He's involved with the Longhorn Steakhouse getting put in by Olive Garden. So yeah, he should be really exciting to listen to. Feel free to shoot any questions you might have. I think he would like to talk about pretty much anything you want to, but his topic will be about commercial development.
Commercial development, like multifamily included, or like shipping places and stuff like that.
I mean, I think he's going to talk about. I don't know if he's ever done any multifamily developments, but he's definitely been a part of larger subdivision kind of development, that kind of stuff. So, yeah. I mean, if you have questions about that, we can certainly see if he has any experience. We can talk to him about it.
Cool.
Because what were the commercial developments you were looking for, Bailey? I think you were looking at potentially self-storage.
Yeah, I like self-storage a lot. I think it's people collect a lot of junk. Consumerism isn't going away.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks,
The
Andy.
only thing with those is just like it's a lot easier to build self-storage and it's cheaper, so you just got to watch the markets. But yeah, I think that'd be cool if you could talk on that too.
yeah, that'd be
Or if
awesome.
you had any experience with it.
Yeah, we can ask. Cool. Well, yeah, awesome. If you, again, send your emails and we'll get you on the list. But otherwise, we'll see you next week, third Wednesday from 6 to 8.
Good stuff. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining
Yeah.
us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming out, guys.
No problem.